opportunity to actually speak to her just before we got started. And I'm just super excited for you to meet her because she's lit, as you guys know. Lisa Gray is the CEO of Black Meteor, and she's going to be introducing the speakers for this session, which is Digital Citizenship, Our New Normal. So over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Hayley. I think that's the first time I've been called lit on a Monday morning. So I'm touched. That's a great way to So thank you everyone for tuning into our Gen Z stage this morning, the first one. It's an exciting one to start your CogX week off. And I'm lucky enough to be here with two key members of Birmingham's Beatfreeks, an engagement and insight agency with a virtual community of young creatives. They are a very impressive agency working with government organisations and brands to enable young voices and creatives to a wider community. First up we have presenting is Fabio Thomas, their project researcher, who will be giving us insights on their new normal for digital citizenship, and then the Take the Temperature report on how COVID-19 is affecting the young lives of young people across the UK. Fabio, he will discuss how we use the digital space and how we'll make the internet work for us. Hi, Fabio.
Hey, John. How's it going?
Yeah, good. And then stay with us afterwards because we'll be speaking to Tara Buckley, their project manager, about how to empower young people to be digital citizens. We'll hear about how Beatfreeks, supported by google.org, and are empowering young people to be safe users and have positive voices online through their Be Internet Citizen project. And we'll go into a bit more detail about that after Fabio's talk. So, Fabio, take it away.
For sure, bro. Cool. So in sort of true researcher style, I'm going to start off with a stat, kick you off on Monday morning. And that is that, so in the context of coronavirus, in the context of this pandemic, 7 in 10 young people say that news saturation and sort of pressure to be in the know about what's going on in the world is increasing their sense of FOMO, fear of missing out, or desire to be online. And I really want to stress the word increasing here. These young people are digital natives. The internet is not an unfamiliar space for them. So what does this increase? What does this increase to be online? What does it mean for their content consumption? What does it mean for their friendships? What does it mean for their creativity? Content, connection, creativity online and on the internet is an intensely sort of familiar space for young people. So what happens when, because of the context in which we find ourselves, because of coronavirus, because of the pandemic, are provoked to do it even more? They're provoked to be online even more, and then what happens to their use of the digital space as a result? So my suggestion is perhaps a predictable one, in that young people are well ahead of the curve in their use of the internet. I think this is both in terms of how they're using it, how they use the internet, but also more pertinently, how that use of the internet affects them personally, affects their mental health, affects their well-being, affects their lives. And the suggestion here, as Tara will go on to speak about a bit more later, is that young people are digital citizens, and quite inherently so. We found that young people increasingly don't see this binary between the digital on one side of things and then the physical on the other, or the real on the other. Being a citizen is inherently a digital act for young people. They navigate the web productively and proactively. And in light of this, what Beatfreeks call for, and what this research that I'll go on to talk about is about how we can talk to the public sector, the private sector, and the third sectors about how they can mold their services around these needs that young people have, how they can sort of grasp hold of a generation that's so keen to make positive impact, to do good, and equip them with the tools and the platforms so they can do so digitally. So before I sort of carry on, I'll give you a bit of background, and then we'll talk about the research a little bit. So my name is Fabio Thomas, and I'm a manager of a project called National Youth Trends at an organization called Beatfreeks. Beatfreeks is an engagement and insight agency built up of a community of young creatives. And what we do is we connect brands, governments, funders directly with young people so that together they can influence the way the world works. The model is really simple, is that the more young people exercise this influence, the more they have their say, the more they have their voice heard, the more relevant institutions become, the better future-proofed these organizations and institutions are. So in this context, I'm going to use a buzzword, and it's not lit, but the buzzword is the new normal. It's all about how young people can play an active role in building this new normal as we move past coronavirus and think about what the world looks like in its wake. So as I said, I'm here to talk about a piece of research which Beatfreeks have conducted called Take the Temperature, and it's specifically about the impact of coronavirus on the lives, but also the futures of young people right across the UK. It's really easy to find. I'll do a little plug, so you can have a look at the report maybe whilst I'm talking. It's so beautiful. It looks amazing. It's got Instagram posts from loads of young people in it. It's got direct quotes from too, and it really embeds youth voice sort of within the report. So if you head over to Google and type in Take the Temperature Research, it should be the first link that pops up, and it's beatfreaksyouthtrends.com. So yeah, go and have a look at the piece of research. What I'm going to talk about is going to skim over some of the main topics within it. Specifically about how young people are using the internet or using the digital space in light of the coronavirus pandemic. So in order to do this research, we spoke to nearly 2,000 14 to 25-year-olds right across the UK, and we asked them about a really, really broad range of stuff, right? So it was around a range of things, whether that be the relationship with their family, right the way through to how they use TikTok, for example. But in sort of all the answers that we got, the digital played a certain key role, perhaps predictably so. So I think the first thing that I want to talk about and address is the idea of content consumption and how we consume content online and how young people do in particular. And it sort of talks that first stat, which I spoke about, which is that in light of this pandemic, 70% of young people say that because of news saturation, because of the need to stay in the know and the want to stay in the know, 70% of young people say they feel increased FOMO, right? They feel more desire than they normally would to be online. What does this then mean for consumption of the news? Something that really, really surprised us perhaps in the research is that 80% of the young people we spoke to said that in this context, in the context of coronavirus, they're getting their news from traditional media sources. So this is stuff like the BBC News app, it's stuff like NHS Online, it's the Prime Minister's updates specifically. Time and time again, this word trustworthy came up about young people looking to sources of information they know, which are trustworthy, so to speak. Young people understand that the internet is a space and was built as a space where sort of everybody can have their say, but when looking for information about the pandemic, when looking for information which is going to help them stay healthy, and help society stay healthy, young people are looking to these trustworthy news sources. So what does this mean for like a rhetoric which in the media quite often paints young people as, young people only get their news from social media, they circulate fake news amongst each other, etc., etc. When they're one of the main groups that do circulate fake news, we found that to be completely the opposite. Young people are going to trustworthy news sources for their news and for their information. And when they did speak about social media, when referring to social media and consumption, it was specifically referred to as a space where fake news operated. And as a result, when looking for news sources, etc., they were falling back onto these trustworthy news sources. So I just want to challenge the idea, I suppose, that when young people are using social media, we don't think that they're the main group which are spreading this fake news. In fact, they're one of the ones who are most conscious of it. So perhaps shifting focus slightly then onto how they communicate and how they connect online. There's been extensive research, not just by us, but by lots and lots of people about the impact of social media on young people's mental health. And obviously, this is a really important thing to address in light of the coronavirus pandemic too. The Take the Temperature research found that in this context, in the context of the pandemic, young people are 3 times more likely to be experiencing mental health worries than the general population. That's 3 times. So we can really, really see that within this group specifically, mental health issues are really, really pertinent amongst young people within the context of coronavirus. We also found out that one of the main ways that they were helping aid their mental health, help sort of push back on these challenges that they're facing, was through connecting with their friends. It was the most popular answer that we got. When we asked, what are the main ways you're dealing with your mental health issues? 40% of young people said the main way I'm doing so is connecting with people, talking to my peers and communicating with them. Obviously, this is predominantly done online, and it could be due to, through WhatsApp, through TikTok, through Instagram, etc. But further than that, through making their own digital spaces and doing so really, really creatively. One of the participants that we spoke to spoke quite extensively how he recreated Glastonbury on the internet for his friends, and they had the Zoom call, and then they used YouTube videos and a number of other resources, like recreate a physical experience on a digital space in order to forge that connection with their peers that they would otherwise get in real life, and as such sort of help their mental health. So with those 2 points then, with in terms of content consumption, in terms of connection and communication, young people are put in a bit of a predicament, really, because they understand that in consuming news in such a way, it has a negative impact on their mental health. They see that in such news saturation, in such FOMO, they're seeing a negative impacts on their mental health. But at the same time, the space they have to go for connection at the moment, and the thing that's helping their mental health most, is also present in a digital space. I think what this really highlights, and is one of the key points that I want to address, is that young people are unbelievably conscious of the dual effect that the internet can have. For them, it's not as simple as, social media is bad for my mental health, or social media is good for my mental health. They understand that it can have a simultaneous good and bad effect on how they act. And it's this level of consciousness which we really understand young people as digital citizens within. They know the true extent of the platforms they're using and how it's impacting not only their lives online, but their lives offline as well. And then further than this, as the idea of being a digital citizen, and this is something we've particularly seen in the past 2 weeks, but also is I think such a central point of like Gen Z culture and being a digital citizen, is social action online. So over half of the young people we spoke to, for example, said that they were making more effort than they normally would to try and help people in need. And we see this with like online petitions, with volunteering, and has come really to the forefront of mainstream of online space in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, and how information is circulated in order to help the cause online, and how young people really mobilize and use this digital space as a space where they can be proactive, where they can participate, and where they can sort of play an active role and try and do good online. Another key point, I suppose, is in doing so, in being like quite active digital citizens, we see young people shine the light on businesses, for example, specifically within the context of coronavirus. So there was this massive thing that happened with Virgin Money Giving, for example, where lots of people were doing the run 5K, nominate 5 people, and then donate £5 via Virgin Money Giving, and then the fallout that comes from that. So you simultaneously see like a massive piece of social action online, which was incidentally set up by a young person. That was a young person's idea. And then how that has changed to like a spotlight being shone on a company like Virgin, and the fallout for that company. And you can see that young people are using a digital space not only to be active digital citizens and participate in these sort of social action projects, but also to shine a light back on business and say, well, what are you doing for these causes? And having a platform for those sorts of voices. And then sort of finally, one thing, and this is my main sort of provocation, I suppose, is how can we better build the internet to accommodate for these desires to be better digital citizens? What does it look like for engagement with government, for engagement with voting practices, for participation in local reform, even for saying, I like this pair of trainers more than I like this pair of trainers? That is an active element of you participating within the way a business works and having your say on a deeper level. So the provocation being like, how can businesses harness this desire from young people to be better digital citizens and use it for good, and think about how young people are willing to play an active role, willing to participate within society, but specifically in a digital way? And how can we better use that space in order for them to have a role in wider society? How can we activate that desire to participate and move it forward and help them with the tools and with the platforms to do so online. That was my keynote, and I'm really happy to chat with some of you guys about it, hopefully in the Q&A. And as far as I understand, I'm going to have a chat with Tara and Lisa about it now, I think.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Fabio. That was really great.
Thank you.
There was lots and lots in there. I'd like to invite your colleague Tara onto the call, who will be speaking afterwards, but I think has got a lot to contribute. She's a project manager for Beatfreeks. And I think, and from what I understand of the business, I'm getting to know them, is they're very collaborative. So it's like everyone's involved, which is wonderful. And I feel like it's the future of working anyway. So God, there is so much to go through there, Fabio. I think one of the interesting things that I read in the report and you brought up in your presentation that if you don't mind, I'd like to kick off with,
Sure.
is the tension that young people have with struggling to consume news. And without it consuming them.
Yeah.
I really liked your insight about how, because there's like, I know myself and working out how I follow what's going on with COVID at points has become stressful, and I've needed media days off. So as someone that's gone and done the research for this particular age group, have there been any tips that you've discovered that have been really useful for people to make sure they're getting the right information without it overwhelming them or making situations worse?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the things that has really come out is, I suppose, to young people, a lot of young people seem to be sticking to like one platform through which they're getting it through. So when we spoke to a lot of young people about the way they're consuming news, a lot of young people have like a favored app or a favored news source. So as opposed to like being bombarded from multiple directions with all of this information all at once, they had a space or like a platform specifically that they would go to for their news, for example. So like the BBC News app, for example, was really, really popular amongst a lot of young people on their phones. And that becomes a space where you actively go to receive your news, as opposed to just being bombarded at it from multiple angles wherever you go. I think there's a few layers to this, though, I would say, in terms of like those apps, they often have push notifications. And about like, so whenever you go on your phone, then you would see if a new headline comes up, you would see it pop up in front of you. And that would also be anxiety inducing for a lot of people. So it's about how young people know that they can go in and manage their push notifications and say, you know what, I don't actually want this information to be coming at me whenever it happens. I in fact want the ability to push the button on my phone which says BBC News and to get it when I want.
Interesting. I also found it really interesting that you mentioned that a lot of the young people you surveyed were getting their news from more traditional news sources. I think sometimes we can default to thinking if it's on an innovative platform, that's where young people are getting it. So tell me a little bit more about that.
So yeah, I think, and again, this one is multifaceted as well in terms of the idea of traditional platform is a bit complicated, isn't it, really? Because there's several layers to it, in that young people may be going on Instagram and finding news from somewhere like the BBC through that platform, and whether that still is a traditional platform or not. I think what we were trying to get at there is that young people see the words BBC or see the words NHS, and that brings up the idea for them of that being a trusted or like a notable or news source, if that makes sense. So I think it's this idea of a traditional media outlet. It does still hold some weight, but it's just the ways young people are interacting with it are different. It's probably either through a social media platform, which they're then getting directed to a different website, or through an app specifically, as opposed to going out on a Sunday and buying the paper.
Yeah, interesting. So Tara, what did you find the most interesting or surprising insight into the work that Fabio has been talking about?
To me, but I guess both the points that have been spoken about already, in terms of, it was news to me that young people wouldn't be going to alternative media streams, and that they would actually collectively be sitting down and watching the Prime Minister's updates.
Yeah.
That was news to me. And overall, the take the temperature research for me was just so important, because at the time that we conducted it in specific, there was a lot of media information suggesting that young people don't want to engage, and that young people aren't social distancing, and that young people basically aren't participating in the joint collectiveness. And research just kind of blew that completely out of the water.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. And in my experience with Gen Zers, they're definitely, I'm a Gen Xer, and I feel like Gen Zers are Gen Z with the internet, but they're a lot more responsible. And I wasn't surprised, but was, when I read that in the paper that a big portion of them did stick to the restrictions and very much towed the party line.
Yeah.
But also at the same time are excited about seeing the massive changes that can happen in a movement. And some of the ones I personally had dealings with have said, well, they said this couldn't happen with climate change, this massive government reform, and look what's happened. So look out us.
Yeah.
So I completely agree.
I think, just to briefly pick up on Tara's point as well, I think like it really hit home as well that Tara's right in that the 2 weeks where we did the data collection with the first 2 weeks of lockdown, and the week we started data collection, there was a headline in BBC News which was literally young people aren't complying to coronavirus. And then we went and did the research, and like 91% of young people said they're strictly complying, and then 99% said they are complying to a differing level of extent. So it's not just compliance, it's either strict compliance to a massive extent or compliance in some capacity to it's pervasive. Young people are participating, but we still see in the media that often they get the finger pointed at them.
Yeah, so interesting. Another point I read in the report that I wanted to talk with you guys is when your CEO said at the top that young people we spoke to agreed that 92% said this could be a moment to change society for the better.
Yeah.
Read, share, learn more, implement, and from this report. And you will be right alongside them, which I agree with. Do you agree with that? Is that the kind of sentiment that you felt when you were doing the research?
100%. I mean, I think that, again, that's another one of those stats, isn't it, where it's just overwhelmingly in one direction. 92% of young people said that this moment, the pandemic, could be a moment to positively change society for the better. And what I think they're referring to there is like how this could be a moment to pause and rethink and reflect upon, and how things have sort of naturally slowed down or taken a moment to think about stuff. And it's exactly that thing I was talking about in terms of being digital citizens. Young people are saying that now is the sort of time where we can shine a light on businesses, we can shine a light on government and say, listen, what are you doing to act in this way? And most of the time that's happening online as well, which I think is really, really interesting. But yeah, overwhelming sense that this could be a positive moment to make change. And whilst it may not be positively framed, I think that's something we're definitely seeing in the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment, in terms of like how this can be a moment, and young people are so willing and so active in terms of how they want to provoke that change.
Absolutely. I think one of the most interesting things last week with the Black Lives Matter movement was the black tiling and how people were communicating that, and how I personally was excited that people were really paying attention about what kind of hashtag and messaging they were putting with that. And I believe that a lot of the younger demographics that I was dealing with or I was reading about were really about the Blackout Tuesday versus Black Lives Matter and the witness of it. I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know, that was such an interesting one, wasn't it? Because there was a fair amount, I certainly felt a fair amount of negative backlash as well towards the Blackout Tuesday stuff. And it just shows, like, I don't know how quickly information and positive action can spread, because as soon as you started getting that negative messaging about the Blackout Tuesday in terms of, it's fine and it's all well and it's all good, but we need to do more, then you saw a wealth of people, sharing information on where to donate to, on how to be a good ally, on loads of other stuff, which sort of, I don't know, you saw that Blackout Tuesday as like the catalyst almost to further change, which I think was really, really good. And it also, like I said, how when something, you can see when some people started to suggest that maybe this wasn't enough, how quickly that spread then after it, which I think was really cool too.
And on that, I think that in recognizing that a black tile is simply not enough to show solidarity and to make continued change, that in itself is like a real understanding of how the digital space and the physical space really has to work together. So posting something on social media is not enough. Go look at the resources that people have so wonderfully been sharing and take that information and do something in your life alongside it. And that just looks to me as if it's really effective activism through both platforms.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things I'm most excited about with this generation, and please agree or disagree, is the fact that they often, the leading activists often anchor back in the science or try to refer as much as they can to the science or the facts that they understand, and seem to be very fluid in their messaging, which I think is key. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult one. I think this idea of social media as a space for fake news is really double-edged, because I think young people are often, information circulates really quickly. We know that. And we can see how specifically and I think this is something that Tara will go on to talk about probably, but in echo chambers, people are repeating similar messaging back to themselves. But I think young people as well make a really concerted effort to go out and search the opposing point of view to their own in order to like legitimize her in some way, or at least see two sides of the coin, so that they can reaffirm to think, no, this is actually what I think, and there are people out there who don't think the same things as me, but this is my own view. To sort of actively try and push back against that echo chamber or filter bubble sort of rhetoric.
Yeah, and Fabio, just before we wrap up, what's the key insight you'd like all the people listening to your talk today to take away with them?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the main insight is not actually a statistic that we can. It's not a number, but it is that young people are unbelievably willing to participate and have a role in how we forge the way the world works, and therefore you should go and listen and talk and act based upon their voices.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Fabio. That was wonderful.
No stress.
Hara, thank you for joining us. We'll be coming back to you soon for your presentation. I think we will see you very soon.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.